I walked into that dinner expecting to meet my wife's colleagues. Instead, I watched her introduce another man as the person she was going to marry. And somehow, I was the only one in the room who didn't know. I was 32. My wife was 30. We had been married for 6 years. Nothing flashy, just stable. Suburban house with the same beige walls we never bothered to repaint. Shared routines. Weekend grocery runs where we split the list down the middle. The kind of life people called safe. She worked in corporate marketing. I worked in IT consulting. Different worlds, but it worked. Or at least I thought it did. About a year ago, she started going to these work networking dinners. At first, they felt normal. Promotions, clients, industry stuff. I didn't question it. They became more frequent. Once a week, then twice, then sometimes 3 nights in a row. She always had a reason ready when she left the house at 18:30 sharp, heels clicking on the hardwood floor. Big client. Important opportunity. Can't miss this one. I believed her. Because why wouldn't I? But small things started appearing. Her phone face down on the kitchen counter more often. The way she checked it at 23:40 when she thought I was already asleep. The faint trace of a different cologne on her coat when she hung it in the hallway at 1:15. Not the one I bought her for Christmas, something sharper. I ignored them. At first, one Thursday she came home later than usual. The dashboard clock in her car showed 2:37 when the headlights swept across the living room window. I was sitting in the dark on the couch, laptop closed on my knees. She didn't notice me right away. She stood in the doorway for a long moment, shoulders slightly rounded, fingers slowly turning her wedding ring like it had become too tight. She slipped upstairs without turning on the lights. I heard the shower start at 2:51. It ran for 23 minutes. The next morning her work bag was lighter than usual. No laptop. Just her purse and a small black notebook I hadn't seen before. When she left for the office at 7:55, I waited until the garage door closed completely. Then I walked over to the hook where she kept her bag every night. The notebook wasn't there anymore. That evening she mentioned another dinner. Same calm voice. Same quick kiss on the cheek before she grabbed her keys. I watched her car pull out of the driveway at 18:42. The taillights disappeared around the corner exactly as they always did. But this time I noticed the passenger seat in her car had been adjusted forward. She always kept it all the way back for her long legs. Someone else had been sitting there. Recently. I stood at the window long after the street went quiet. The house felt heavier than usual. The clock on the wall ticked past 19:00, then 19:15. I still didn't move. Because part of me already knew there was more coming, and another part of me wasn't ready to find out what it was. It started with photos. We used to take them all the time. Holidays, dinners, random selfies in the kitchen at 7:20 while coffee brewed. Then suddenly she stopped. If I raised my phone, she turned her face away or lifted a hand to block the lens. She would walk out of frame or find something urgent to do in another room. At first I told myself it was nothing. Just insecurity about how she looked after long days at work. But the refusals became sharper. One Saturday morning at 9:45, I tried to capture her laughing over breakfast. She stood up so fast the chair scraped against the tile. The smile vanished before the shutter clicked. Then came the night her phone lit up while she was in the shower. 23:12. The screen glowed on the nightstand, casting a cold rectangle of light across the ceiling. A new message notification appeared. No name attached. Only a contact labeled L short. Clean. Deliberate. I picked up the phone. My thumb hovered. I didn't open the message. Instead, I tapped the contact itself. The number that appeared was mine. My own phone number saved under the single letter L, not my name. Not husband. Not even my initials. Just one replaceable letter. I placed the phone back exactly where I found it. The shower water was still running. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the closed bathroom door until the sound cut off at 23:29. When she stepped out, towel wrapped tight, she glanced at the phone. Her eyes moved to me for half a second longer than usual. Then she continued drying her hair as if nothing had happened. Later that same week, I asked her about the contact. She gave a quick explanation about privacy at work. Said colleagues sometimes looked over shoulders. Said it was safer that way. I nodded and let the subject drop. But the seed had already taken root. Because 2 nights later, at 1:08, another message came in from L. This time, the preview line was visible before the screen dimmed. It wasn't from my phone. I never sent it. And she still hadn't changed the contact name. A few weeks later, I noticed her finances changing. Not drastically. Just subtle shifts, small transfers from our joint account. Cash withdrawals she never mentioned. She started talking about helping out a colleague, then investing in a friend's startup, then fronting money for a project. Every explanation stayed vague. No names. No numbers. No paperwork left on the kitchen table. I asked once. She shut it down quickly. After that, I stopped asking out loud. But I started watching the statements. One night at 23:55, she fell asleep on the couch with her laptop still open on her chest. The screen had not timed out. Blue light glowed across her face. I wasn't planning to look. At least that's what I told myself when I moved closer. An email thread filled the screen. Dozens of messages exchanged over weeks. The name at the top wasn't mine. It belonged to someone else. A man. The tone wasn't professional. Sentences lingered too long on personal details. They discussed venues, budgets, future timelines. Reservations for two at places I had never heard of. Flights booked for dates when she told me she would be at a conference. Then I saw the line that stopped my breathing. Once we're married, things will finally settle down. I closed the laptop lid without a sound. She stirred but didn't wake. I walked upstairs at 0:17 and sat on the edge of our bed until the numbers on the clock blurred. 2 days later, an email arrived in my inbox from her work address. A formal invitation. Black tie. Elegant venue downtown. The subject line read networking event. Important contacts. In the body, she listed me simply as a colleague from a partner firm. No mention of husband. No mention of my actual name. Just another professional connection she needed in the room. I stared at the screen for a long time. I didn't reply. I didn't confront her. I didn't cancel. Instead, I pressed accept on the RSVP and marked the date in my calendar. Friday, 19:00. Because whatever was waiting at that dinner, I needed to see it with my own eyes. The night of the dinner, everything felt wrong. The venue was upscale. Private dining room with dim chandeliers and heavy linen tablecloths. Not a corporate event. More like a celebration. People moved slowly, dressed like the night carried weight. I arrived at 18:40, 15 minutes early. I gave the name she had listed on the invitation. The host scanned the guest list, then looked up at me for a beat longer than necessary. He said nothing, just nodded and let me through. I stayed near the back wall. Across the room, she stood laughing, shoulders relaxed, head tilted slightly. A version of her I hadn't seen in years. She wasn't alone. A man stood close beside her. Tall, dark suit. His hand rested lightly on the small of her back. Comfortable, familiar. Guests approached them one by one. They smiled, shook his hand, hugged her. Some offered quiet congratulations. Others raised glasses in their direction. At 19:15, a woman in a red dress leaned in and asked something. My wife turned to the man, placed her hand flat on his chest, and answered with a soft smile. That single gesture locked everything into place. I wasn't just being lied to. I wasn't just being hidden. I was being replaced. I stayed in the shadows and watched. The conversations around me continued. Snippets drifted past. Mentions of honeymoon destinations. Questions about future plans. Someone laughed about how perfect they looked together. The finances. The late nights. The emails. The cash withdrawals. The contact saved as L. It all clicked into a second, parallel life she had been building right under my roof. She had been living two versions at once. One with me in the beige suburban house. One with him in whatever world this elegant room represented. I remained motionless until 1937, when the lights dimmed further for what looked like an official toast. That was when I noticed the small detail that cut deepest. On her left hand, the wedding ring I had given her 6 years ago was gone. In its place sat a new, thinner band. Simple. Elegant. Nothing I had ever seen before. She caught sight of me at the exact moment the first glass was raised. Our eyes met across the room for less than 2 seconds. She didn't look surprised. She looked prepared. And in that brief second, I understood the real question wasn't whether she had been planning to leave. It was how long she had been waiting for me to finally notice. I didn't confront her right away. I stayed. I watched. I listened. For the rest of that evening, I moved through the room like a ghost. She never approached me. She kept her distance, smiling at others while her eyes occasionally flicked in my direction. I noted every conversation she had, every laugh, every casual touch on his arm. The more I paid attention, the more horrifying it became. She had different stories for different people. With him, she was starting a business together. With me, she was simply investing in colleagues. With him, she needed money for their shared future. With me, it was always temporary support, same accounts, same money, same woman running two separate realities at once. I stood near the bar at 2012 and watched her lean into him while another guest congratulated them on their upcoming plans. She never once looked uncomfortable. That's when I started connecting the dots. The increased networking dinners, the missing funds, the secrecy around her phone, the adjusted car seat. She wasn't cheating in the usual way. She was maintaining two complete lives, and both of us were unknowingly funding them. I needed proof. At 2045, I approached him. Calm, measured. I introduced myself exactly as she had described me on the invitation. A colleague from a partner firm. He shook my hand without hesitation. We spoke for 12 minutes. Within that short time, it became clear. He had no idea I existed, just as I had known almost nothing about him. He spoke freely about how they met 18 months ago, how she told him she had been single for years, how they were building something real, how he had already invested heavily, both emotionally and financially. He mentioned specific amounts, large ones. I listened without changing expression. My grip on the glass stayed steady. He even showed me a photo on his phone. The two of them on a weekend trip I thought she had spent at a marketing retreat. The date stamp read 3 months earlier. That was when the final realization settled in. This wasn't impulsive. This wasn't messy or emotional. This was calculated, planned, executed with precision. We were both targets. I excused myself at 21:03 and stepped outside into the cool night air. The city lights stretched out below the venue balcony. I stared at them for a long time. Because if she had built two lives this carefully, the real question wasn't how long it had been going on. It was what else she had hidden that I still hadn't found. I didn't wait any longer. I walked straight across the room at 21:08, past the waiters carrying champagne, past the small clusters of guests, straight up to her and the man standing at her side. In front of him, in front of everyone, I said her name, not the polished version she used here, the real one. The one I had used every morning for 6 years across the breakfast table. She froze. Her shoulders tightened. Her hand slipped from his arm. The easy smile she had worn all evening vanished in a single breath. Her entire body changed, as if two separate worlds had just slammed into each other in the middle of the private dining room. The conversations around us died out. The room grew quiet. I looked directly at him and spoke again calmly. I asked if she was going to introduce me properly, or if I should explain who I was. Silence swallowed the space between us. He looked from her to me, then back again. Confusion crossed his face first, then concern, then something closer to fear. She tried to recover. Her mouth opened. A nervous laugh escaped, too sharp, too late. She reached for words, but they came out fragmented and rushed. I pulled out my phone. I turned the screen toward him and scrolled slowly. Our wedding photos from 6 years ago. The house we bought together. The Christmas mornings. The vacation shots where she wore the same necklace she had on tonight. 6 years of evidence. Undeniable. I watched his face collapse piece by piece. The color drained. His shoulders dropped. The confident posture he had held all evening folded inward. She started speaking faster. Desperate sentences spilled out, tripping over each other. Excuses, half-truths, contradictions piling up between every breath. None of it held, because the truth sat clearly in the quiet that followed. She hadn't loved either of us. She had used both of us. Two separate lives. Two separate funding streams. Two men kept carefully apart so she could keep building whatever she wanted in the middle. I lowered the phone at 21:14. The guests nearest to us had stopped pretending not to watch. Someone set a glass down too loudly. She looked at me then, eyes wide, calculating. And in that moment I understood there was still one layer left. Because if she had managed to run 2 full realities this long without either of us suspecting the full truth, the real question wasn't why she had done it. It was what else she had prepared for the moment it all fell apart. I left that night alone. I walked out of the venue at 21:27 without looking back. The cool air hit my face as the heavy doors closed behind me. He left separately a few minutes later. We didn't speak again that evening. The drive home was silent. The house felt colder when I stepped inside at 22:14. Her car was still gone. I sat at the kitchen table until 3:40, staring at the joint account statements on my laptop. I filed for divorce 3 weeks later. The financial damage took longer to understand. Loans taken in both our names. Large transfers to accounts I had never seen. Investments in projects that didn't exist. Thousands gone. Some of it traced back 18 months. Some of it still missing. He contacted me once, 6 days after the dinner, not out of anger. Just clarity. We compared timelines over email. Every story aligned perfectly. Every absence. Every late night. Every unexplained expense. She had been running both lives in parallel for over a year. The overlap was exact. After the papers were served, she disappeared. No forwarding address. No final conversation. No apology that carried any weight. Her phone went straight to voicemail. Her work email stopped responding. She simply vanished from both worlds at once. I spent the following months untangling what remained. Closing accounts. Selling the house. Sorting through the pieces she left behind. But one detail kept returning in the quiet hours. In the weeks before she disappeared, she had made one final withdrawal. A significant one. The transaction showed up on the last statement I received. The destination was an offshore account. The name on that account wasn't hers. It wasn't his either. And to this day, I still don't know whose it was. The hardest part isn't the betrayal. It's realizing how easily reality can be rewritten when you trust the wrong person. I didn't miss the signs. I saw them. I just explained them away because the truth was inconvenient, and she relied on that. People think deception is about lies. It's not. It's about giving someone just enough truth to keep them from asking the right questions. 2 lives. 2 men. 1 illusion. And the worst part? For a long time, it worked.